Welcome back to Fear Rest. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from the remote cabins of West Virginia. These are tales of people who sought solitude in the mountains and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The cabin I inherited from my uncle sat about 40 minutes outside Elkins, tucked into a hollow so narrow you could barely turn a truck around. Uncle Raymond had lived there for almost 30 years before he died, and nobody in the family wanted it. Too isolated, they said, too much work to maintain. I was 29 and going through a divorce, so isolation sounded pretty good to me. I figured I'd spend a few weekends up there, clean it out, maybe sell it come spring. The drive up was beautiful in that stark November way, trees stripped bare, sky the color of old steel. The cabin itself looked smaller than I remembered from childhood visits, just 2 rooms and a loft, weathered siding the color of driftwood. But it was solid. Raymond had kept it tight. I parked and started unloading supplies, planning to stay the weekend and sort through his things. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I'd grown up in Charleston, so I was used to traffic sirens people. This was different. The trees seemed to drink up sound. Even when I dropped a box of canned goods on the porch, the thud felt muted, like the air was too thick to carry it properly. I spent the afternoon going through Raymond's stuff. He'd left everything: books on woodworking, old National Geographics, a police scanner that didn't work anymore. In the loft, I found a journal. Most of it was mundane. Notes about weather, about fixing the roof, about a black bear he'd seen near the creek. But toward the end, the entries got shorter, more tense. Heard it again tonight, closer this time. Found the marks on the tree, same pattern, staying inside after dark now. I told myself it was nothing. Raymond had been in his 70s, alone too long. Maybe his mind had started going. But as I read, my coffee tasted sour in my mouth, and I kept glancing at the windows. Night came fast in the hollow. 1 minute it was gray twilight, the next it was full dark, pressing against the glass like something solid. I made dinner on the old gas stove, canned soup, nothing fancy, and tried to relax. The cabin had electricity but no TV, no internet. Just the sound of wind moving through bare branches outside. Around 9 I heard the knocking, not on the door, on the wall. The back wall, the one that faced the slope. 3 measured knocks, like someone rapping their knuckles against wood. I froze with my spoon halfway to my mouth. The cabin was built tight to the hillside back there. You couldn't fit a person between the wall and the slope. It had to be a branch, I thought, wind pushing a branch against the siding. But when I went outside with my flashlight, there were no branches close enough to touch the cabin. The nearest tree was a good 6 feet away. The ground was soft from recent rain, and I could see my own boot prints clearly in the beam of light. There were no other prints. Nothing. I went back inside and locked the door. Then I felt stupid for locking it. Who was I keeping out? A branch. The knocking came again at 10:30. Same wall, 3 knocks evenly spaced. This time I didn't go outside. I sat on Raymond's old couch and stared at the knotty pine paneling, watching it like the wood itself might split open and show me what was making that sound. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to admit I was scared, but I was. At 11, I heard my uncle's voice. It came from outside, muffled but clear enough. "Claire," it said my name. "Claire, honey, let me in." The voice was perfect, that rough smoker's rasp Raymond had, the gentle tone he'd always used when I was little. But Raymond had been dead for 3 months. I'd been to his funeral. I'd watched them lower him into the ground at the cemetery in Elkins. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, like they might fold under me. "Who's there?" My voice came out thin and high. "It's me, honey." "It's cold out here." The voice sounded patient, almost amused. "Come on now, open up." I didn't move, couldn't move. I stood in the middle of that small cabin and felt my heart slamming against my ribs. The voice came again, still gentle, still patient. "Claire, don't make me wait out here in the cold." Something about the phrasing felt wrong. Raymond would never say it that way. He'd say "Claire Bayer" when he wanted to tease me. He'd say "Open the damn door, it's freezing." This was close, but it wasn't right. Like someone had listened to him talk but didn't quite understand how he spoke. I backed away from the door until my shoulders hit the far wall. The knocking started again, but this time it was on the front door. 3 knocks, then 3 more, then the voice, "Claire." I don't know how long it went on. An hour maybe. The knocking would stop, and I'd start to breathe normally, and then it would start again somewhere else. The back wall. The the side window, the door. And always, eventually, the voice. Sometimes it was Raymond. Once it was my ex-husband Derek asking why I'd left him. That one made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because Derek had left me, and whoever or whatever was out there had gotten the story wrong. Around 2 in the morning, everything stopped. The silence was so sudden, it felt like a weight lifting off the cabin. I sat on the couch with Raymond's old hunting rifle across my lap. I'd found it in the closet, still loaded, and I'd been clutching it for hours, even though I had no idea what I'd do if something actually broke through the door. I didn't sleep. I sat there until gray dawn light started filtering through the windows, and then I started throwing my things into my car. I was zipping up my duffel bag when I saw it. On the back wall, on the outside, someone had carved something into the siding. I could see it through the window. Deep gouges in the wood forming a shape, a rough circle with lines radiating out from it like a child's drawing of the sun. But the lines were wrong, too many of them, and they didn't spread evenly. They clustered on one side, reaching toward the roof like fingers. The wood around the carving was fresh, pale and clean. It had been done recently. Maybe that night I left, didn't even finish packing. I drove down that narrow road faster than was safe, and I didn't look back. Later, when I called a real estate agent about selling the property, she asked if I wanted to clean it out first. I told her to sell it as is. Whatever Raymond had left behind could stay there. I never found out what happened to him in those final weeks, but I think about that journal entry, staying inside after dark now, and I wonder if he stopped staying inside. I wonder if he opened the door one night when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. I wonder if that's why they found him outside, half a mile from the cabin, lying in the creek bed with his eyes open and no marks on him at all. Story 2. I've been living in the cabin outside Somersville for about 8 months when I finally got around to exploring the old logging road behind the property. I know that sounds lazy, but between work and just keeping the place running, hauling water when the well pump died, patching the roof after that ice storm in February, I hadn't had much time for wandering. The cabin was cheap because it was off-grid, and I jumped on it without really thinking through what off-grid meant in practical terms. The logging road was overgrown but still visible, a channel of compressed earth winding up into the hills. It was early June, everything green and thick, with summer coming on. I'd finished my coding work for the day. I did web development remotely, which was the only reason I could afford to live out here, and I figured I'd take a walk before dinner, see where the road went, maybe find a good spot to set up a camp chair and bring a book sometime. The road climbed steadily for maybe 20 minutes, switchbacking through second-growth forest, tulip poplars, oak, scattered pine. The kind of woods that feel endless when you're in them, even though you know there are towns and highways not that far away in any direction. I passed a rusted metal drum, old logging chain tangled in the leaves beside it, past a tire that had been there so long a tree had grown through the center of it, the usual debris of industry that had pulled out and left its bones behind. Then I saw the boot print. It was right in the middle of the trail, pressed into a patch of soft mud where water had pooled after the rain 2 days ago. A clear print, deep and fresh-looking. The strange thing was, there were no other prints leading up to it, and none leading away, just that single print like someone had stepped down from the sky, left their mark and vanished. I stopped and stared at it, tried to make sense of it. Maybe someone had walked here before the rain and this was the only print that survived, but that didn't feel right. This print was clean, defined. If it had been there for 2 days, it would have been at least partially washed out. I looked around. The woods were quiet, just the sound of wind moving through leaves overhead. Nobody else was out here, I was sure of that. You develop a sense for it when you live alone in a place like this. You can feel when you're the only person for miles. I kept walking, told myself I was being paranoid, but my shoulders were tight and I kept glancing behind me. The road curved around a shoulder of the hill, and that's where I found the structure. It wasn't a building, exactly. More like someone had built a frame using young trees, bent them over, and lashed them together with what looked like wire. The frame formed a kind of archway over the trail, maybe 7 feet high. Hanging from the wire were small objects. At first I thought they were wind chimes or something decorative. Then I got close enough to see what they were. Bones. Animal bones, mostly small ones, bird skulls, what might have been a raccoon's jawbone. They were bleached white, and someone had drawn on them with dark ink, symbols I didn't recognize, geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. The bones turned slowly in the breeze, clicking against each other with a sound like dice rattling in a cup. My mouth went dry, not the normal kind of dry, the kind where it feels like you've swallowed dust, like your tongue is made of cotton. I stood there trying to decide what to do. Keep going, turn around. The smart thing would have been to turn around. But part of me was curious. And maybe part of me didn't want to walk back past that boot print. I ducked under the arch and kept climbing. The road got steeper, more eroded. I was breathing hard, and I could feel sweat soaking through my shirt even though the day wasn't that warm. The trees seemed closer here, pressing in from both sides. The light had that underwater quality it gets in deep forest, green and filtered and strange. I found 2 more arches. Same construction, same hanging bones. The symbols drawn on them were different though, more complex. One of them had what looked like handprints drawn in black ink, dozens of them overlapping until they formed a solid mass. Then the road opened into a clearing. It was roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across. The ground was bare dirt, packed hard, with no grass or undergrowth. In the center of the clearing was a cairn, a pile of stones about waist-high, carefully stacked. And surrounding the cairn, driven into the ground in a wide circle, were branches. Dead branches stood upright like a fence, each one about as tall as my shoulder. I should have left then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and go back to the cabin. But I walked into the clearing instead, walked right up to that cairn. I don't know why, maybe because I'd come this far and turning back felt like admitting I was scared. The stones were river rock, smooth and round. Someone had carried them up here. The nearest creek was at least half a mile down the hill. As I got closer, I saw that the rocks had been painted. Not all of them, just certain ones scattered throughout the pile. Dark red paint flaking with age, symbols again, and handprints, small handprints like a child's. I heard a sound behind me, a footstep, a branch snapping under weight. I spun around. There was nothing there, just the wall of trees ringing the clearing, dark gaps between the trunks. But I could feel it, that sense of being watched. The hair on my arms was standing up, my skin prickling like I'd brushed against something electric. Hello, my voice sounded small. Is someone there? The branches started to rattle. All of them at once, the dead branches stuck in the ground around the cairn. They rattled and clattered against each other even though there was no wind. The air in the clearing was completely still. I backed away from the cairn. My heel caught on something, a root, a rock, I don't know, and I stumbled, caught myself. The rattling got louder, and then I heard the voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that seemed to rise up from the ground itself. It said my name. Benjamin, long and drawn out, like someone savoring the taste of it. Benjamin. I ran, didn't think about it, just turned and sprinted for the trail. I crashed through those bone arches without slowing down, heard them break and scatter behind me. Ran until my lungs were burning and my legs were shaking and I couldn't run anymore. When I finally stopped and looked back, I couldn't see the clearing, couldn't see anything but trees. I made it back to the cabin as the sun was setting, locked the doors, closed all the curtains, sat in the dark with my laptop open, trying to convince myself I'd just panicked, that there was a logical explanation for everything I'd seen. The next morning, I found something on my porch. A smooth river stone like the ones from the cairn. It was sitting right in front of the door where I would have stepped on it if I hadn't been looking down. Someone had painted a red handprint on it, a small handprint. I moved out 2 weeks later, told the landlord I'd gotten a job offer in Pittsburgh, needed to relocate right away. He kept my deposit and didn't argue. I think he was relieved to be rid of me. Sometimes I look at satellite images of the area on my computer. I can't help it. I zoom in on the hills behind where the cabin was, trying to find that clearing. But the forest is too dense. The canopy hides everything. Whatever's up there, it doesn't want to be seen from above. Story 3. The cabin had been in my wife's family for generations, one of those places that gets passed down without anyone really wanting it, until finally it lands on someone who doesn't know better. That would be us. Jenna's great-uncle Porter died in March, and by April we were the proud owners of a 100-year-old structure with bad plumbing and a family of raccoons in the crawl space. We lived in Morgantown, about 2 hours north, and we figured we'd use it as a weekend getaway. Fix it up slowly. Make it nice. I drove down alone the first time because Jenna had a conference she couldn't miss. This was late May, everything blooming, the mountain laurel just starting to open up. The cabin sat in a little fold of land outside Helvetia, surrounded by state forest on 3 sides. Pretty country if you liked isolation. Porter had lived there year-round for almost 40 years, no neighbors for miles. The place was worse than I'd expected. The roof leaked, there was black mold in the bathroom, and the front porch sagged like a hammock. But the bones were good, solid chestnut framing, stone foundation that hadn't shifted an inch. I could work with it. I spent Saturday cleaning and making a list of what needed fixing. The list got long fast. That night I heard something under the floor. I was lying in the bedroom, which was just a mattress on the floor because the old bed frame had collapsed, and I heard movement in the crawl space beneath me. Scratching sounds, slow and deliberate, not frantic like an animal. It sounded like someone dragging their fingernails across the underside of the floorboards. I sat up. The scratching stopped. I waited, barely breathing. After about a minute, it started again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Moving from one side of the room to the other, following some path I couldn't see. "Raccoons," I said out loud, just to hear my own voice. "Those damn raccoons." But I didn't believe it. Raccoons moved differently, quick and chaotic. This was purposeful. I got up and went outside with a flashlight. The crawl space entrance was around back, a piece of warped plywood leaning against the foundation. I moved it aside and shone my light into the gap. The beam cut through darkness and cobwebs. I could see the underside of the floor joists, the stone foundation walls, old beer cans someone had tossed down there decades ago. Nothing moving. Hello. I called into the darkness, felt ridiculous doing it. "Any raccoons down there?" My voice echoed slightly, then silence. I put the plywood back and went inside, told myself I was being jumpy because the cabin was old and I wasn't used to country sounds. Jenna would laugh at me when I told her about this. I could already hear her. "You scared of some scratching, Mr. I used to do urban exploration." The scratching didn't come back that night. I slept poorly anyway, waking up every hour or so listening. Sunday I spent working on the porch, replacing rotten boards. It was good to be outside doing something physical. I could almost forget about the scratching. Almost. I left Sunday evening, told Jenna about the cabin, about the work it needed. Didn't mention the scratching. On Wednesday, I drove back down. I'd taken the week off work to really dive into the renovations. The plan was to stay through Friday, get as much done as possible. Wednesday night, the scratching started again. Same as before, slow, deliberate, moving beneath the floor. I lay there listening to it, my heart beating too fast. After about 10 minutes, it stopped. But this time I heard something else. A voice, faint, muffled, coming from below. It sounded like someone saying, "Help." I sat up fast enough to make myself dizzy. The voice came again, barely audible, "Help me." "Who's there?" I shouted at the floor. "Who's down there?" Silence, then, "Help me, please." It was a woman's voice, young-sounding, scared. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside, threw aside the plywood covering the crawl space entrance and dropped to my knees, shining the light into that dark space. "Where are you? Are you hurt?" Nothing, no movement, no voice, just that dank smell of earth and mildew. "I heard you," I said. "I'm here, tell me where you are." Still nothing. I squeezed through the entrance. It was tight, barely wide enough for my shoulders, and crawled into the crawl space. It was maybe 3 feet high, enough room to move on hands and knees, but not to stand. The ground was damp. My flashlight beam swung wildly as I crawled, illuminating stone and wood and nothing else. "Where are you?" My voice sounded strange down there, absorbed by the earth. I crawled the length of the cabin. Found old newspapers from the 1970s, a broken chair, a tobacco tin full of rusty nails. No person, no sign anyone had been down here in years. The dirt didn't even look disturbed. I crawled back out and sat on the ground, breathing hard. My hands were shaking. I wanted to call Jenna, hear her voice, but there was no cell service out here. Porter had a landline that still worked, but calling my wife at midnight to tell her I was hearing voices under the floor seemed like a good way to worry her for no reason. I went back inside, didn't sleep, sat on the couch with all the lights on, waiting for morning. Thursday I worked outside all day, didn't go in the cabin except to use the bathroom and grab food. When the sun started setting, I seriously considered just driving home, but that felt like giving up. Letting some creepy sounds run me off. I was 46 years old, for Christ's sake, too old to be spooked by an empty crawl space. Thursday night I heard the voice again. This time it said my name. Aaron, clear as anything. "Aaron, help me." I didn't go outside, didn't investigate. I sat on that couch and waited for dawn. The voice kept calling. Sometimes it was the woman's voice. Sometimes it sounded like Jenna. Once it sounded like my mother who'd been dead for 12 years. Friday morning I packed my truck. I was loading the last of my tools when I noticed the marks on the foundation. Deep scratches in the stone, running in parallel lines. 4 lines, like claw marks. They ran from the ground up to where the floor joists met the foundation. Fresh scratches. I could see white stone beneath the weathered gray surface. I got in my truck and drove away. Halfway home, I stopped at a gas station and called Jenna from the payphone. "We are selling the cabin," I said. "I don't care what we get for it. I want it gone." She didn't argue. Something in my voice must have told her not to push. We listed it a month later, sold it in October to a couple from Ohio who wanted a hunting cabin. I almost warned them, almost told them about the voice, the scratching, those marks in the stone. But what would I say? But the crawl space was haunted. They'd think I was crazy. Sometimes I wonder if they hear it, if they're down there now lying awake in the dark, listening to something beneath the floor calling their names. I hope not. But I also hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they leave before they see what's making those sounds. Because on my last night there, just before dawn, I heard something else. Something moving in the crawl space, but different from the scratching. It sounded like someone breathing, long, slow breaths. And once, just once, I heard laughter. Quiet and cold and patient. Whatever's under that cabin, it can wait. It's been there a long time. It'll wait for the next person who comes along. The next person who hears it calling and decides to answer. Story 4. I never wanted to be a fire lookout, but the job posting said solitude and minimal human contact, and I was coming off a bad year, so I applied. Got hired within a week. They were desperate. The previous lookout had quit after 2 months, and fire season was already starting. They put me in Blackwater Station, a tower cabin in the Monongahela National Forest, accessible only by a 4-mile hiking trail. Perfect for someone who just deleted all their social media and stopped answering their phone. The hike-in was beautiful. Early July, everything lush and green, cicadas screaming in the trees. I passed a few backpackers heading out, and they all gave me these pitying looks when I told them I was stationed at Blackwater. One guy, maybe 60, shook his head and said, "Rather you than me, friend." I didn't ask what he meant. Figured it was just the isolation getting to him. The tower itself was a 40-foot steel structure with a small cabin on top, 1 room, maybe 12 by 12, windows on all sides. Sparse furniture, a cot, a table, a 2-way radio, a wood stove. The previous lookout had left in a hurry, apparently. There were still canned goods in the cabinet, a jacket on a hook, a paperback novel open and face down on the table, like they'd just stepped out for a minute and never came back. My ranger supervisor, a woman named Darlene Voss, had hiked in with me to show me the ropes. How to use the Osborne fire finder, how to call in coordinates, how to work the radio. She kept glancing out the windows while she talked, like she was checking for something. "You'll do fine," she said when she was done. "Just remember, stay inside after dark. And if you hear anything outside at night, don't investigate, call it in first." What would I hear? I asked. She was already heading for the ladder. "Probably nothing, just stay inside." The first week was exactly what I needed. I'd wake up with the sun, spend the day scanning for smoke, reading, writing in a journal I'd started keeping. The silence was incredible. No traffic, no voices, no notifications, just wind and birds and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. At night I'd watch storms move across the mountains, lightning illuminating the ridge lines. The knocking started on my 8th night. I was lying on the cot, almost asleep when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 quick knocks on the wall. I sat up. The cabin was dark except for the glow from the wood stove. "Hello?" I called out. No response. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, tap, tap, tap. A different wall this time, the north-facing one. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing but darkness and trees. The tower was 40 feet up. Nobody could knock on the walls unless they were on the ladder. I went to the hatch in the floor and looked down. The ladder was empty. No one there. Tap, tap, tap. Right behind me, I spun around. Empty cabin, just me and the sound of my own breathing. I didn't sleep that night. The knocking came at irregular intervals, always 3 taps, always moving around the cabin. By dawn, I'd almost convinced myself it was thermal expansion, the metal contracting as it cooled. Almost. I radioed Darlene in the morning, told her about the knocking. There was a long pause before she responded. "Did you go outside?" "No, you said to stay inside." "Good, keep doing that. It'll stop eventually." "What will stop? What's doing it?" Another pause. Just stay inside after dark, Vera. That's the important part. That night the knocking was louder, and it wasn't just knocking anymore. I heard footsteps on the platform outside, the metal catwalk that circled the cabin, slow, measured steps, walking around and around. I sat in the center of the room with my back to the fire finder, trying to see out all the windows at once. Then I saw it. Just for a second, a pale shape moving past the north window, tall and thin, hunched over like it was too big for the platform. It moved out of sight before I could focus on it. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the radio. "Darlene, there's something on the tower." "Don't look at it." "What?" "Don't look at it, Vera. Close the curtains and don't look outside until dawn." "What the fuck is it?" "Close the curtains, now." I pulled the curtains shut on all four sides, sat in the middle of the room with my knees drawn up to my chest. The footsteps continued, around and around, and then I heard breathing, right outside the door, long wet breaths like someone with fluid in their lungs. I don't know how long it went on, hours maybe, the breathing, the footsteps. Once something scraped against the door, fingernails on metal, a sound that made my teeth ache. When gray dawn light finally started showing through the curtains, everything stopped. I waited another hour before I opened them. The platform was empty, nothing there. I found the marks later when I went outside to check the rain gauge. Long scratches in the metal railing, deep gouges that went down to bare steel, and on the door 4 parallel scratches like something with claws had tried to pry it open. I stayed 2 more nights, called Darlene each morning, asked her what was happening. She wouldn't give me a straight answer. "It's just the way that tower is," she kept saying. "Previous lookouts have all dealt with it. You'll get used to it." But on the 3rd night something changed. The knocking started earlier before sunset, and this time when I looked out the window I saw it clearly. It was standing on the platform, maybe 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, its body bent at wrong angles like its joints didn't work properly. Its skin was pale, almost white, stretched tight over prominent bones. But the worst part was its face. It didn't have one. Just smooth skin where features should be, except for a mouth, a wide slash that opened and closed like it was tasting the air. It pressed itself against the window. I could hear its breath fogging the glass. Its mouth stretched wider, impossibly wide, and I saw teeth. So many teeth going back and back into its throat. I grabbed my pack, grabbed the radio, opened the floor hatch, and climbed down that ladder faster than I've ever moved in my life. I was on the ground and running before I even realized I'd made the decision to leave. I hiked out in the dark, 4 miles through forest with just my headlamp, breaking every rule about night hiking in bare country. I didn't care. I could hear something behind me, branches breaking, something large moving through the undergrowth. Following, I made it to my car at the trailhead just before dawn. Drove straight to the ranger station. Darlene was there, coffee in hand, looking like she'd been expecting me. "You left the station," she said. "I quit." She just nodded. "You lasted longer than the previous one." She made it 6 days. "What is that thing?" Darlene looked out the window at the mountains. "We don't know. It's been there as long as anyone can remember. Long before the tower was built, people used to call this area the empty quarter. Wouldn't hunt here, wouldn't camp here. We probably shouldn't have put a tower there, but," she shrugged, "it's good sightlines, and someone has to watch for fires." "You're going to send someone else up there?" "We are hiring, yes." I left West Virginia the next week, moved to Ohio, got a job doing data entry, something boring and safe and surrounded by people. I still think about that thing sometimes. Wonder if it's still up there, pacing that platform, waiting for the next person desperate or stupid enough to stay. And I think about something else, something I didn't tell Darlene. On my last night before I ran, that thing pressed against the window, and I heard it speak. Not with its mouth, but directly in my mind, like a thought that wasn't mine. It said, "Vera, stay, I'm lonely." Story 5. The property came with a lot of family baggage. That's what my sister Lacey called it when she found out I was moving into Grandpa Hollis's old place. He'd been dead 3 years, and the cabin had sat empty all that time, slowly getting swallowed by the forest. It was about 15 miles outside Webster Springs, down a dirt road that disappeared for half the year when the creek flooded. I was 32, unemployed after the mill closed, and living rent-free sounded better than moving back in with my parents. Lacey helped me clean the place out. We spent a weekend hauling out boxes of Grandpa's stuff, old hunting magazines, broken tools, a stuffed bobcat that had lost most of its fur. The cabin was small but well-built log construction from the 1940s. It had electricity now, and someone had installed a septic system in the 80s, so it wasn't completely primitive. Just mostly primitive. You sure about this? Lacey asked as we were leaving. It's pretty isolated out here, Connor. That's the point, I said. She gave me a look. Grandpa didn't die in the cabin, you know. They found him almost a mile away, out in the woods, just lying there. Heart attack, they said, but she trailed off. But what? Mom said his eyes were open, and he had this expression like he'd seen something that terrified him. I told her she was being dramatic. Lacey had always loved ghost stories, local legends, all that stuff. Me, I was practical. Grandpa was 84 when he died. Old men have heart attacks. It happens. The first month was fine, better than fine actually. I got into a routine. Wake up early, chop wood, make coffee on the wood stove. I'd spend the afternoons looking for work online. The cabin had satellite internet, surprisingly, and the evenings reading or walking the property. The forest was dense, mostly oak and maple, with thick undergrowth that made it hard to move around. But there were old trails Grandpa had maintained, and I started following them, seeing where they went. One trail led to an old shed about a quarter mile from the cabin. Half collapsed, roof caved in. Inside I found rusty traps, a shovel, some chain. Nothing interesting. Another trail led to the creek, which was pretty, rushing over gray stones. Good spot to sit and think. The third trail ended at a clearing. It was strange, a perfect circle of bare ground, maybe 20 feet across, with nothing growing in it. Not even grass, just hard-packed dirt. The trees around it were dead, gray skeletal things that looked like they'd been scorched, though there was no sign of fire. The clearing had a smell too, sweet and rotten, like meat that had started to turn. I stood at the edge of it, not sure why I felt reluctant to walk inside. It was just a clearing. Probably the soil was bad, acidic or something, and that's why nothing grew, but it felt wrong. The air was too still, even the birds were quiet here. I turned around and went back to the cabin. That night I couldn't stop thinking about the clearing, where the trail ended. The dead trees, that smell. 3 days later I went back. I don't know why, morbid curiosity maybe. The clearing looked the same. But this time I noticed something in the center, a depression in the ground like something heavy had been sitting there. I walked into the clearing. The ground felt soft under my boots, spongy in a way that didn't match how hard-packed it looked. In the depression, half buried, was a bone. I bent down to look at it. Too big for a dog, too small for a cow. I didn't touch it. When I stood up, I felt dizzy. The trees seemed to tilt, and for a second I couldn't remember which direction I'd come from. I stumbled back the way I thought was right, found the trail, and got the hell out of there. That night I heard something outside the cabin, not close, distant, back toward the clearing. A sound like branches breaking, something moving through the forest. I turned on the porch light and looked out, but the darkness beyond the light was complete. I couldn't see anything. The sound came closer, slow and steady. Whatever it was wasn't trying to be quiet. It was just moving through the undergrowth, breaking through brambles and saplings, heading toward the cabin. I went inside and locked the door. The sound stopped about 50 yards away. Then I heard something else. A voice, low and rough, barely human. It said, "Hollies." My grandfather's name. I didn't answer, didn't move. The voice came again, louder, "Hollies." Then silence. I waited, heart pounding, but the voice didn't come back. I sat on the couch with a baseball bat across my lap until dawn. When it was light enough, I went outside to look around. Found tracks in the soft ground near the tree line, not animal tracks. Not human either, long indentations like something had dragged itself along. I called my dad that morning, asked him about the clearing. He was quiet for a long time. "Grandpa told me about that once," he finally said. Said it was there when he bought the property in '62. Local folks wouldn't go near it, called it the Dead Hollow. Said something lived there, something old. Grandpa thought it was superstition, but near the end, Dad paused. Near the end, he wouldn't go past the cabin after dark. Told me something was calling his name at night. What was calling him? He wouldn't say, just told me to never answer if I heard my name called in the woods. And for God's sake, don't go to the clearing. I should have left then, packed my stuff and moved back to town, family baggage and all. But I stayed, partly pride, partly stubbornness. and partly because leaving felt like admitting something I didn't want to admit. The voice came back every night. Always after dark, always calling Holly's from somewhere back in the woods. I ignored it, kept my doors locked, lights on, tried to pretend it wasn't happening. Then one night it called my name instead. Connor, long and drawn out, Connor. I looked out the window. There was something at the tree line, tall and pale, standing just outside the reach of the porch light. Its body was wrong, too long, proportions distorted, and its face, I couldn't make out details, but I could see dark holes where eyes should be. It stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then it turned and walked back into the forest. Not hurrying, just walking. I left the next morning. Didn't pack everything, just threw clothes and my laptop in the car and drove out. Called a realtor from a motel in Webster Springs and told her to list the property. She asked if I wanted to wait for a better market. I told her to list it now, as is, for whatever she could get. The property sold in February. The buyer was some guy from Maryland who wanted hunting land. The realtor called to let me know, and I asked her to do me a favor, tell the buyer to stay away from the clearing. She laughed, thought I was joking. I was. I hope he doesn't go there. I hope he's smarter than Grandpa was. Smarter than I was, but I have a feeling he'll find it eventually. Everyone who lives there finds it, and once you find it, it knows you're there. I think about that thing I saw sometimes. Wonder what it is, what it wants. But mostly I think about something Dad told me before we hung up. He said Grandpa's funeral was closed casket, not because the body was damaged, it was, but because they couldn't get his eyes to close. No matter what they did, his eyes stayed open, staring at something no one else could see. Story 6. I was doing field research for my ecology thesis, spending 3 weeks alone in a cabin near Cranberry Glades. The cabin belonged to the university, a rustic research station they'd been using since the 70s. 1 room, wood stove, bunks for 4 people, though I was the only one there. My project was studying salamander populations in high-elevation wetlands, which meant a lot of time wandering around in soggy boots, taking water samples and flipping over logs. The first week was productive. I'd located 3 healthy populations of cheat mountain salamanders, collected enough data to make my advisor happy, and settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings I'd work in the field, afternoons I'd enter data on my laptop, evenings I'd read or work on my notes. The solitude was nice, peaceful. On the 8th day, I found the photographs. I was organizing my gear and noticed a plastic bin under one of the bunks. Inside were old field notebooks, some marked with names I didn't recognize, previous researchers who'd used the cabin. Out of curiosity, I flipped through them. Most were just data, species counts, weather observations, GPS coordinates. But tucked into the back of one notebook was an envelope containing 4 photographs. They were Polaroids dated July 1987. The first showed the cabin from outside, looking pretty much the same as it did now. The second showed the interior, 3 people sitting at the table, 2 men and a woman, all smiling, all young. Graduate students maybe. The third photo was of the forest, nothing remarkable. The 4th photo made my skin crawl. It showed something standing at the tree line. The photo was taken at dusk or dawn, hard to tell. The figure was humanoid but not quite right, too tall, too thin, its limbs hanging at odd angles. The quality was poor, grainy, but I could make out enough detail to see that its head was tilted at an extreme angle, like its neck was broken, and it was facing the camera. I turned the photo over. Someone had written in faded ink, "It watches. Do not acknowledge." I put the photos back in the envelope and tried to forget about them, tried to focus on my work. But that night, lying in my bunk, I kept thinking about that figure, the way it stood, the tilted head, and those words, "Do not acknowledge." Around midnight, I heard tapping on the window, soft at first like branches in wind, but there were no branches close enough to touch the cabin. I checked when I first arrived, worried about fire hazards. The tapping continued, rhythmic and deliberate, tap, tap, tap. I got up and looked out the window, nothing, just darkness and the vague shapes of trees. The tapping stopped. I went back to bed, told myself it was nothing, an animal maybe, and tried to sleep. The next night it came back. Same tapping, same window. This time I didn't get up. I lay there listening to it, my sleeping bag pulled up to my chin, and waited for it to stop. It didn't. It went on for hours, patient and persistent, until I finally fell asleep from exhaustion. On the 3rd night I saw it. I'd been lying awake, dreading the tapping when I heard a different sound, footsteps on the gravel outside. slow, dragging footsteps like someone injured. They circled the cabin once, twice, then stopped at the window. I didn't want to look. Everything in me screamed not to look, but I couldn't help it. I turned my head and there it was, pressed against the glass. A face. Pale and elongated, features stretched and distorted. Its eyes were too large, black and reflective like an insect's. Its mouth hung open, revealing teeth that were too numerous, too small like a fish's mouth. And its neck was bent at that same impossible angle from the photograph. We stared at each other for maybe 5 seconds. Then it smiled. Or tried to, its mouth stretched wider, pulling up at the corners in a grotesque parody of human expression. And I heard it speak, muffled through the glass. "I see you, Naomi." I scrambled backward off the bunk, knocking over my water bottle. By the time I looked at the window again, it was gone. But I could hear those dragging footsteps circling the cabin, around and around. I grabbed my phone, no signal, I knew that, but I had to try, and huddled in the corner farthest from the windows. The footsteps continued for at least an hour. Then they stopped. The silence was somehow worse. When gray dawn light finally started showing through the windows, I packed my stuff. Didn't even care about my research, my thesis, any of it. I was loading my car when I noticed something on the hood, smeared in dirt, like someone had drawn with their finger, a face. The same elongated face I'd seen at the window. And beneath it, more words, "Come back soon." I drove out without looking back, went straight to campus, found my advisor, and told her I was withdrawing from the project. She was annoyed. I'd barely completed half my research, but I didn't care. I made up some excuse about a family emergency. I never told anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? I tried to convince myself it was stress, isolation, my mind playing tricks. But I know what I saw, and I know it knew my name. The worst part came 2 months later. I was going through my photos, deleting duplicates, when I found something I didn't remember taking. A photo dated from my last night at the cabin. It showed the interior, my gear scattered around, my sleeping bag on the bunk. And in the corner of the frame, partially visible through the window, that face, pressed against the glass, watching me while I slept. I deleted the photo. Then I deleted it from my trash, but I can still see it when I close my eyes. That face, that smile, those words written in dirt, "Come back soon." I won't, not ever. But sometimes, late at night in my apartment, I hear tapping on my window. I live on the 4th floor. There's nothing out there that should be able to reach my window, but I hear it anyway, tap, 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 and I never ever look. Story 7. My brother Ethan convinced me to buy the property with him. It was cheap, 40 acres outside Marlinton with a small cabin that needed work, and we figured we could split time there. Use it for weekend trips, hunting, maybe rent it out on Airbnb once we fixed it up. Ethan lived in Virginia, I lived in Pittsburgh, and neither of us could afford it alone. Together, it seemed doable. We drove down on a Friday in late September to check it out. The cabin was better than the photos suggested. Solid logs, good roof, just needed cleaning and some minor repairs. The property was mostly forested, with a creek running through the back section. Pretty country, peaceful. "This is great," Ethan said, standing on the porch. "We could really do something with this place." I agreed. We spent the weekend exploring the property, marking trees that needed to come down, planning where we'd put a fire pit. That night we stayed in the cabin, sleeping bags on the floor, talking about our plans. Ethan fell asleep around 10. I stayed up later, reading by headlamp. Around midnight I heard singing, faint and distant, coming from outside. A woman's voice, singing something slow and mournful. I couldn't make out words, just the melody. It was beautiful in a haunting way, and I found myself listening, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing, just darkness and trees. The singing continued, seeming to drift closer, then farther away. I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cold, my breath fogging. The singing came from the direction of the creek. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed slightly. The singing stopped. I waited, feeling foolish. Probably just someone camping on the adjacent property, their voice carrying on the wind. I went back inside. Ethan was still asleep, snoring softly. I got back in my sleeping bag but couldn't sleep. I kept listening for the singing, but it didn't come back. The next morning I mentioned it to Ethan. He laughed. "Probably a radio from down the road. Sound travels weird out here." We drove back to Pittsburgh that afternoon. 2 weeks later, Ethan went back to the cabin alone. He had a week off work and wanted to start on renovations. He called me the first night. "Did you hear singing when we were here?" he asked. "Yeah, I told you about it." "Right, well, I'm hearing it now. It's really close, Garrett, like right outside." "Go check it out." I did. "There's nothing there." He sounded uneasy. "It's weird. When I open the door, it stops. When I close it, it starts again. Maybe it's the wind, or the cabin settling." "It's not the wind, it's a voice. A woman singing." We talked for a while longer, and he seemed to calm down. He promised to call me the next day, but when he called, he sounded worse. "I didn't sleep last night," he said. "The singing went on for hours, and Garrett, I heard my name. She was singing my name." "Who was?" "I don't know, I can't see her, but she's out there." "Ethan, come home. We'll figure this out later." "No, I'm not letting some weird prank run me off. I paid for half this place." That was the last time I talked to him. He stopped answering his phone after that. I called and called, left voicemails, texted, nothing. By Wednesday, I was worried enough to call the local sheriff's department. They sent a deputy to check on him. The deputy called me Thursday morning. "Your brother's not at the cabin," he said. "His truck is here, his stuff is here, but no sign of him." They launched a search. 20 volunteers, dogs, the whole deal. They found Ethan 3 days later. He was a mile from the cabin, deep in the woods near the creek. He was sitting with his back against a tree, his eyes open, his hands folded in his lap. No signs of trauma, no obvious cause of death. The medical examiner said his heart had just stopped. He was 37 years old, healthy, no history of heart problems. I went down for the funeral and to collect his things from the cabin. I didn't want to go inside, didn't want to be there at all, but I owed it to him to pack up his stuff properly. The deputy offered to go with me. I accepted. The cabin looked normal. Ethan's sleeping bag on the floor, his tools neatly arranged, dishes washed and stacked, like he just stepped out for a walk and would be back any minute. I was packing his clothes when the deputy called from outside. "You should see this." I went out. He was pointing at the ground near the porch. There were marks in the dirt, not footprints exactly, more like something had been dragged. The marks led away from the cabin toward the woods. "These go all the way to where we found your brother," the deputy said. "We thought maybe he'd been injured, crawled there, but he wasn't injured. And these marks," he trailed off. "What about them? They don't look like someone crawling. They look like something was pulled or led." I sold my half of the property a month later. Didn't care what I got for it. The new owner was some hunting club from Maryland. They've had the place for a year now. I don't know if they've heard the singing. Don't know if they've seen anything strange. I don't want to know. But I think about Ethan sometimes. Think about him sitting against that tree, his heart just stopping for no reason. And I think about what the medical examiner told me at the funeral. She pulled me aside, said she needed to tell me something off the record. "Your brother's eyes," she said, "we couldn't close them. Usually we can, but his, they wouldn't close." And there was something else. Under his fingernails we found dirt, like he'd been digging. But his hands were clean when we found him. No dirt anywhere else, just under his nails. I didn't ask what she thought it meant. I didn't want to know. But sometimes late at night I hear singing, faint and distant, like it's coming from very far away. A woman's voice, beautiful and mournful. And sometimes I swear I hear my name woven into the melody. I never answer, I never go to the window. And I never, ever plan to return to West Virginia. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.